Welcome back. The last session we had discussed about the 6M framework and try to formalize a way in which we can think about strategy. How can you make a plan of action in order to execute your activities in the digital space? We discussed about the 6M framework, which included the mission, the market, the message, the media, money, and measurement. We looked into the example of a company that was involved in the promotion of mobile phones, and we looked into how different segments of customers can be reached through different types of messages using different media. We also discussed briefly what are the different ways in which you can do budgeting with respect to how much money to spend on the campaign and what kind of measurement matrices or key performance indicators were appropriate in each of these cases. And in doing so, we created a very comprehensive and a holistic plan, or what we generally call a strategy, about how you can operationalize all the different elements so that you can achieve your objectives in the digital space. Now, in today's session and the sessions that are going to follow, we are going to discuss briefly about something that might be a little scary for a lot of us. We will discuss about analytics and why analytics is important in the digital space. Now, what is analytics? It is important for us to understand what analytics is and why analytics is so important before we get into specific tools and specific applications, specific terms that are used as part of analytics in the digital space. And don't get scared with the whole concept of analytics, because I am going to keep it as simple as possible so that all of us can understand this. Now, analytics is the process of measuring, collecting, analyzing and reporting the behavior of visitors on a website, on social media platforms, on all the different digital assets that a company or a marketer might have under their control, so as to understand and optimize these platforms so that we can achieve the objectives better. Because many a times, unless we have a very proper analytics system in place, we might not be able to understand what kind of behavior customers or visitors are showing or depicting in each of these platforms. And unless we know what is happening, unless we understand what is happening, it might be very difficult for us to optimize these campaigns and to make best use of all of the campaigns that we are doing on the digital space. So think about a situation. Think about a situation where you thought that you might want to start a search engine marketing campaign. You wanted to do a pay-per-click campaign on Google search engines. Now you have identified a set of keywords that work best for you, or you think that work best for you. You have designed advertisements. You have linked them to your landing pages. You have spent a lot of money, but at the end of the day, you might not be getting the right amount of traffic from these platforms. How do you know what is the right amount of traffic that you should get? How do you know whether or not you are getting justifiable returns from the amount of money that you are trying to put into all of these platforms? So this is where we need to understand what is the impact of our campaign, because if we don't necessarily know the impact of our campaign, we are basically shooting in the dark. We don't know what is the outcome of whatever we are doing on the social space. So although we created the whole strategy and we created a mechanism by which you can integrate both the digital and the traditional spaces, we were not able to understand necessarily whether or not these objectives were being met. So that is one primary reason for which we do analytics, so that we can understand the impact of these campaigns, without which it might be not appropriate and not we might not be able to optimize these campaigns. The second reason why analytics is important is because it helps us to measure trends and not just absolute figures, because many a times trends have much more insights, trends have something that is much more meaningful as compared to absolute figures. Now you might find that today your site had 10 visitors, tomorrow there were 20 visitors, the next day there were 30 visitors, the day after that there were 40 visitors. In isolation, all of these numbers don't necessarily mean anything. But if you look into the trend over time, you might find that there is an incremental increase in the number of people who are coming to your website, which might be a positive indicator of whatever are the activities that you're doing on the digital space. So understanding trends and measuring trends is the second thing, or another important aspect why we do analytics. Again, like we discussed the case of marketing strategy and the 6M framework, we discussed how the entire digital landscape is very fragmented. There are a lot of different platforms out there. There are search engines, there are emails, there are mobile platforms, there are social media platforms, there are the traditional platforms that exist, etc., etc. And there should be a specific focus on all of these platforms. Now, unless we know specifically which of these platforms is performing in what respects, we might not be able to optimize the budgets that we have to the best use. So, we might have different returns or different ways in which customers interact with, say, search engines as compared to how they interact with email campaigns. So, by doing analytics, we are able to focus on platforms, and with enough data and enough platforms over time, we would be able to identify what kind of platforms work best for the campaigns that we have, what kind of campaigns work on what seasons of the year. Say for example, for a Diwali sale, you might have one type of platform that works better than the other types of platforms. So, email campaigns might be most appropriately used when it comes to festive seasons as compared to a search engine marketing campaign that might work in other periods of time. So, again, you can focus on platforms and you can identify what kind of platforms are giving you better returns as compared to the other platforms. So, that is a third element of why you might want to do analytics. You are also able to identify a lot of anomalies that might happen, because many of these things that you find from analytics are things that you would anticipate you might find. Now, there might be a few of these things which are unanticipated or which are generally called outliers or anomalies. Now, unless you capture all the data that is available and unless you go into all the data in a very deep, in a very systematic sense, you might never be able to understand any anomalies that exist. Say for example, you had a certain segment in mind. Your segment that you wanted to sell your products was the age group of people between 20 to 30 years old, and you started doing a lot of promotions, a lot of campaigns on digital tools, using digital tools so that you can reach out to this group of people who are 20 to 30 years old. But unless you do analytics, you might not necessarily know if there is another segment that is actually buying your product. Consider that you did your analytics and you identified that there is a group of people between 50 to 60 years old who are also buying your product in large numbers. Now, because there is this anomaly, and because you have been able to identify this anomaly from the analytics that you were doing, you are now able to target a new group, and you are now able to establish a new customer segment which otherwise you might not have been able to address. So, that is why you might even be able to understand a lot of anomalies, a lot of things which are not very intuitive in nature, and that is the reason why you might want to do analytics. Now, in a very application oriented way or in a very specific way, analytics helps you to identify who your target audience is or who is the right kind of people who are getting to see your campaign. It helps you to optimize your campaign in such a way that you can increase brand awareness and advocacy. So, you can increase your brand awareness, you can reach out to the right kind of people who are audiences who are engaging with your campaign, and thereby you can increase user generated content and advocacy. You can drive a lot of website traffic, because many a times, like I mentioned to you just a while ago, you might find that there are different platforms which have different roles to play. Say for example, there might be one platform like a search engine marketing platform which might be best suited to drive a lot of traffic to your website. On the other hand, a social media platform might be more appropriate for building brand reputation or building brand awareness. Now, in case your objective was to increase website traffic, you might want to focus on search engine marketing as compared to social media marketing. You might want to put more money into search engines rather than putting money into creating content on social media. So, that is why by looking into analytics and data out there, you might be able to optimize campaigns in such a way that you can drive more website traffic. You might be able to discover areas of the site that basically are having higher bounce rates. Now, bounce rate is when the customer is not interested in looking at the content that you are providing, and the customer decides to exit your page and go back to the search engine or go to a different page, etc. Now, what has happened is the customer has now basically decided that your site is no longer of value to them, and the customer has decided to quit from your website. Thereby, you have some way stopped an opportunity to engage with the customer. There might be websites which have specific areas which lead to such bounce rates. Say for example, there might be broken links. you have a link provided on a website wherein there is no landing page to that link, and because of the fact that there is no page connected to a link that you have provided, every time the customer clicks on it, he will get a page not found message, and thereby the customer now wants to leave the website. So unless you do analytics, you're going to be in the dark, and you will never realize that there are such problems with your website. So by doing analytics, now you are able to identify areas of your website or areas of your digital asset that needs to be improved, or needs to be optimized, or needs to be enhanced, so that you can have a better you can provide a better experience to the customer. In some cases, like we discussed in one of the previous sessions, there are lead generation and lead nurturing activities that are done. So unless you know what is the structure of your sales funnel, unless you know how many people are prospects, how many people are coming and filling up the or signing up the form and becoming part of your database, how many people are actually coming into your e-commerce platform, how many people are actually buying products from you, you might not be able to understand what is the kind of lead generation that you are able to do. You might not be able to understand what kind of lead nurturing activities have been impactful. You might not be able to know whether people are actually moving down the funnel, etc. So by doing analytics properly, you might be able to do lead generation and lead nurturing in a much better manner. You might be able to do customer retention better, because many times customers are vocal just before, say for example, the customer is dissatisfied with the kind of service or the product that you are selling, and the customer now goes to social media and starts complaining about it, starts talking about it. Unless you have an analytics platform in place, it is humanly impossible for you to keep track of all customers out there, and you might not be able to identify customers who are unhappy with the products that you are selling or services that you're providing to customers. Now, by being able to understand which customers are unhappy or which customers are dissatisfied, you now have the opportunity to rectify the problems and thereby retain customers better. So by having better analytics, you might be even able to retain customers and have greater customer retention in place. You might be able to sell more products to existing customers, which is also known as upselling, wherein you sell more products to customers which increase the total amount of revenue that you get from customers. And in sum, by doing all of these things, you might be able to increase the sales that you get from the market in general, because you are now able to optimize all different efforts across all different platforms and all different channels. So one, you might be able to get a better returns for all the money that you're spending across different channels, and two, you might be able to get hold of a lot of new customers who were until recently not part of your portfolio, and because you are now able to have more customers, they might be buying more, they might be buying new categories of products, and therefore they might increase the top line, or they might increase the sales of the company. So all of these are different reasons because of which we focus so significantly on analytics. Now coming to data, there are different places or different types of data that we have access to. I'll just try to list down the kind of data that we have access to, because it is important for all of us to understand what are the different avenues from where we can capture data, because only once we have the complete understanding of what are the different places from where we can capture data, can we use this data to make insights and make sense about the campaigns that we are doing. So the first and most important area that we capture data from in the case of digital platforms is the online data that we get. Online data can come from websites, it can come from social media platforms that you have, it can come from email campaigns that you basically might be doing, it can come from online forums, etc. So think about all the owned assets that you have, your websites, your social media accounts, your email campaigns, the kind of blogs that you have, the kind of native applications that you might have on mobile platforms, etc. All of these platforms are going to give you rich data. The website is going to give you data about how many people visited the website, how many people went from each of these links to another link. Say for example, how many people came to the home page, how many people navigated to different parts of the website, how many people filled in forms to give you data about themselves, how many people actually went into the website and bought products from you. All of this is available from the website data itself. Similarly, you might have Facebook accounts, you might have Twitter accounts, you might have Instagram, LinkedIn accounts. So most of the times, if you look into analytics that is provided by these social media accounts, you might see that there, it talks about how many people are engaging with you, how many people are actually visiting your pages, how many new subscribers are you getting, etc., etc., etc. If you think about emails, when you do email campaigns, you might be able to capture data about how many people, how many emails were delivered to inboxes, how many of these people opened these emails, how many of these people clicked on the links that were provided on emails to go to your landing page. All of these things can be captured. Similar is with the case with any of the digital assets that you own. So online data is the first source of data that we have. The second source of data that we have are the databases that you have. Say for example, we discussed this briefly. Many times when we are doing email campaigns or when we are doing different campaigns, there are databases that we basically would have. And many times these databases are somewhere linked to the customer relationship management tool that we are having, or the loyalty programs that we are doing, or these are databases about existing customers, etc. So again, databases provide us rich data. Say for example, a customer who is logged into his or her account is going through your website, browsing through your website, you now basically know at an individual level what the customer has been doing, and all of this data is captured into the database. So databases are the second source of information that you have. Many times there are software, specific softwares that capture a lot of specific information. So these are third party softwares that capture information about the kind of web browsing behavior that people have, the kind of problems that your website is having. Say for example, if customer is using a certain web browser, the browser is now going to capture details about how the customer has moved from different parts of your website. If you are using a cookie based tracking, then the cookie is going to now capture what kind of behavior did the customer show in your when he or she was interacting with your website. So software data is the third source of data that you have. Many times we have apps which are provided on app stores, and app store data is also something that marketers use very extensively, which basically captures how many people are visiting the app, how many people are searching for the app, how many people are downloading and using the app, how many people are interacting with the payment gateway of the app, how many people are interacting with the advertisements that are provided on the app, etc., etc., etc. So app store data is again something that we can have. There are e-commerce platforms which capture a lot of data. Say for example, when you go into any e-commerce platform, there is a certain behavior that you portray. For example, you might be going to the e-commerce platform from an email promotional activity that the e-commerce platform is doing. You might also be going to the e-commerce platform from different search engines based on the PPC campaigns that they are doing. You might go to the e-commerce platform, you might search for different products, you might come into the product pages, you might read different reviews that are out there. After every review, you might find that there is a small thumbs up button that either says that you like the review was helpful, the review was not helpful, etc., etc. So you might be able to use all of this data also to make more influences or more inferences about how the customer behaved on e-commerce platforms. And then finally, you have to remember that much before the entire digital space came into being, there was always offline data that was available. So every time the customer goes into the retail space, there is a point of sale data that is captured. Say for example, you go to a big organized retail store, you might be providing a membership card at the end of the purchase, and this membership card basically now captures all the different products that you have purchased, all the different price points at which you have purchased these products. They also know what kind of demographic, what kind of age group, gender, income, etc., etc. is the customer from. So now point of sale data can also be used by companies to target, to make sure new products are provided, to make sure products are positioned in certain way, etc. You also have a lot of transactional records within the company in an offline format. You have customer service logs that are available every time the customer reaches out to a telecaller, every time the customer comes to your service station, every time the customer is reaching out to any customer service professional, there is a service log that is generated. So all of this can be used, and in some specific customizable versions, you might still want to use in-person surveys or in-store surveys or mall intercept surveys, etc., wherein you might want to take a specified questionnaire or a specified instrument to the customer and ask customer for data. So all of these different elements that you see on the screen are ways in which you can gather data, and it is important that you have to use data from as many of these platforms, try to integrate all of this data so that now you can have a much more clearer, a much more comprehensive picture of how your campaigns are performing in the digital space. Okay, so now although we have discussed all the different elements or all the different sources from where data can be gathered, our attention is going to be predominantly on data capturing and data analytics in the digital space, because the course is predominantly focused on digital marketing.